The conference room smelled of sterile air conditioning and old money. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, my hands folded in my lap, watching my siblings vibrate with anticipation. Tyler was checking his crypto portfolio on his phone. Chloe was subtly adjusting her ring light for a sad selfie later. Kyle was already drafting an email to his broker. They looked like sharks sensing blood in the water. I just felt tired. Mr. Sterling, the estate executor, cleared his throat. The sound was dry, like paper tearing. To my grandchildren, Tyler, Chloe, and Kyle. He read, his voice flat. I leave the liquid assets of the estate to be divided equally. The sum total is $10.8 million. That is $3.6 million each. The air in the room shifted instantly. It was electric. Tyler let out a low whistle. Chloe squeezed Kyle's arm so hard her knuckles turned white. They did not look at me. They did not need to. I was just the furniture, the quiet cousin, the archivist who spent her weekends dusting old books while they were out building their brands. And to my granddaughter, Morgan, Mr. Sterling continued. He paused. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out something heavy. It hit the polished table with a dull, metallic thud. It was a key, but not a shiny, brass key to a safety deposit box. Not a sleek, digital key card to a penthouse. It was an iron key, about 6 inches long, pitted with corrosion and flaking orange rust. It looked like something you would find at the bottom of a shipwreck. I leave the contents of the storm cellar beneath the lighthouse, Mr. Sterling finished. Silence. Then, Tyler snorted. The cellar? He laughed, picking up his $3.6 million check. What is down there, Morgan? Grandma's old canning jars? Maybe you can open a pickle stand. Chloe giggled, covering her mouth. Oh God, Morgan. I am so sorry. That is literal trash. She left you trash. Kyle did not laugh. He just looked at me with cold pity. It is fitting, isn't it? You liked all her old junk. Now you own it. I reached out and took the key. It was cold. It was heavy. The rust stained my fingertips instantly. I did not gasp. I did not protest. I simply accepted the weight. I closed my hand around the rough metal until it bit into my skin. Is that all? I asked Mr. Sterling. He looked at me over his spectacles. His eyes were unreadable. That is all, Morgan. Great, Tyler said, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket. Let us get out of here. I have a dealership to visit. Enjoy your rust, Morgan. They walked out, their laughter echoing down the hallway. I sat alone in the silence, holding the inheritance of the overlooked in my fist. Stop scrolling for a second. If you have ever been the one doing all the work while someone else gets all the credit, if you have ever been the dependable one who gets left behind while the loud ones get the glory, drop a wave in the comments. I want to see who here knows exactly how cold that iron key feels. The sound was a high-pitched mechanical scream. It whined and ground down, vibrating through the mahogany floorboards of the library. It was an industrial shredder, a massive, heavy-duty beast Tyler had rented specifically for today. It sat in the center of the room like a hungry idol, smelling of hot motor oil and ozone. I stood in the doorway, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, watching them feed it. They were not shredding tax documents or old bank statements. Tyler was feeding it leather-bound journals. Grandma Catherine's journals. 60 years of tidal charts, sketches of gears, and handwritten observations about the coastline. Next to the journals was a stack of legal pads. My handwriting. 5 years of my own research notes, organizing her eccentric ideas into a coherent history. And this, Chloe said, holding up her phone to get the perfect angle for her live stream, is what we call a fresh start. We are literally purging the hoarding energy, you guys. Look at this dust. She laughed, a bright, performative sound, and tossed a bundle of my research notes into the hopper. The machine roared. It chewed through the paper in seconds, spitting out fine, white confetti into the clear plastic bin below. Bye-bye, trash, Kyle said, kicking a box of blueprints toward the machine. Honestly, Morgan, you should thank us. We are saving you the trouble of moving this garbage to your new cellar. Decades of history rained down as confetti. That was my life. That was Grandma's mind. It was being turned into bedding for hamsters. A normal person might have screamed. A normal person might have thrown themselves in front of the machine, clawing at the paper, begging them to stop. But I remained motionless. There is a concept in psychology called the freeze response. Most people know about fight or flight, but they forget the third option. When you grow up in a house where your voice is mocked, where your anger is used as evidence of your instability, and where your tears are treated like a performance, you learn to freeze. It is not weakness, it is a survival mechanism. It is an invisible chain you wrap around your own throat to keep yourself from making a sound that will only bring more pain. You learn that if you stay perfectly still, the predators might get bored and move on. For 20 years, my silence had been my shield. But today, standing in that library, the silence felt different. It was not a shield anymore. It was a weapon. I looked at the confetti filling the bin. I realized that if I fought them for it, they would only enjoy the destruction more. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to validate their cruelty with my pain. I refused to give them the satisfaction. I reached into my pocket and closed my hand around the cold, rough iron of the key. It dug into my palm, grounding me. "Are you done staring?" Tyler asked, over the noise of the shredder. "Or do you want to take a bag of this with you? For your scrapbook?" "No," I said. My voice was quiet, steady, and devoid of emotion. "I have everything I need." I turned my back on them. I walked out of the library, down the long hallway where the portraits of our ancestors stared down in judgment, and opened the heavy front door. The coastal storm had started. The wind hit me instantly, carrying the scent of salt and rain. It was cold, wild, and clean. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me, muffling the sound of the shredder and their laughter. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots, and I did not look back, not once. The lighthouse stood on the edge of the headland, a solitary sentinel against the gray Atlantic. It had been decommissioned years ago, its light dark, its paint peeling. To my siblings, it was an eyesore, a liability. To me, it was the only place in the world that made sense. I unlocked the side door and stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of damp stone. I did not turn on the lights. I did not need to. I knew every inch of this place by heart. The memories hit me as I walked up the spiral staircase. While Tyler, Chloe, and Kyle spent their summers at expensive camps or interning at their father's firm, I was here. I was the one who drove Grandma Catherine to her doctor's appointments. I was the one who sat with her on the porch, listening to the foghorns. They called her a hoarder. They called her eccentric, crazy cat. She is just filling the house with junk. Kyle had sneered last Thanksgiving, looking at the piles of metal scraps and rolled-up blueprints on the dining table. Someone needs to put her in a home before she hurts herself. I had stepped in front of him then, my voice trembling but firm. She is not going anywhere. He had laughed and walked away. He did not see what I saw. He did not see the nights when the storm raged outside, and Catherine's eyes would light up with a fierce, brilliant intelligence. She was not hoarding junk. She was building. "Morgan, hold the light," she would whisper, her hands arthritic but steady, sketching complex diagrams on the back of old envelopes. "The tide is power. It is free, infinite power. We just need to catch it." We spent hours in this lighthouse, drafting schematics for turbines that could withstand the crushing force of the ocean. She taught me about torque, about salinity, about the geometry of waves. She was not just my grandmother, she was my mentor. I was not just her caretaker, I was her apprentice. "Why do you not tell them?" I asked her once, watching her assemble a small prototype from brass gears and repurposed motor parts. "Why do you not show them what you can do?" She looked at me over her glasses, her gaze sharp. "Because they do not look, Morgan. They only see the rust. They do not see the engine underneath." She tapped the paper. "Let them think I am crazy. It keeps the vultures away." I reached the lantern room at the top. The glass was streaked with salt, but the view was endless. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken the real inheritance, the cash, the stocks, the liquid assets. They thought I was down here crying over a pile of scrap metal. I looked down at the iron key in my hand. It did not open the front door. It did not open the lantern room. I knew exactly where it went. I walked back down the stairs, past the living quarters, past the storage rooms, all the way to the basement. The boiler room was dark and cramped. Behind the old rusted water heater, there was a heavy steel door set into the foundation itself. To anyone else, it looked like a storm shelter, a place to hide from a hurricane. I slid the iron key into the lock. It fit perfectly. I was not just inheriting a cellar, I was inheriting the engine. My phone buzzed again. It was the third time in 10 minutes. I pulled it out of my pocket, the screen glowing harsh and bright in the dim basement. A notification from Instagram. Tyler had tagged me in a post. It was a photo of a sleek, silver sports car, some limited edition Italian model that cost more than a house. He was leaning against the hood, holding a bottle of champagne, grinning like he had just invented fire. The caption read, "Some of us build empires, some inherit rust. Legacy. Hustle. Thanks, Grandma." I swiped it away. Another notification popped up, a text from Chloe. "Hey sis, sent a little care package to your apartment. Just wanted you to have something to remember the good old days by. Enjoy the puzzle." I knew exactly what she meant. The shredded paper. She had boxed up the destruction of my life's work and mailed it to me as a joke. The notifications kept coming. Buzz. 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 Like angry wasps trapped in a jar, desperate to sting. They were high on the dopamine of unearned wealth, drunk on the power of finally being the winners. They wanted me to engage. They wanted me to be bitter. I turned the phone off and set it on top of the old water heater. The silence that followed was instant and profound. I turned back to the steel door. It was heavy, reinforced with crossbeams, the kind of door you would find on a bank vault or a bunker. The iron key was still in the lock. I took a breath, gripped the handle with both hands, and pulled. It groaned, a deep, metallic protest of disuse, and then swung open. Cold, dry air rushed out to meet me. Automatic lights flickered on overhead, revealing a long, narrow room lined with metal shelves. It was not a storm shelter. It was an archive. There were no cans of beans or bottled water. Instead, there were rows of labeled boxes, filing cabinets, and drafting tables covered in dust sheets. And in the center of the room, on a pedestal, sat a book. It was a thick, leather-bound volume titled Nautical Almanac, 1978. I walked over to it. My footsteps echoed on the concrete. I opened the cover. Inside, the pages had been hollowed out to create a hidden compartment. Resting in the hollow was a stack of legal documents, crisp and official. I picked up the top one. United States Patent Office. Method and apparatus for tidal energy conversion. Inventor, Catherine Sterling. Sterling, Mr. Sterling's last name. She had used the executor's name as a pseudonym. I flipped through the stack. Patent after patent. Turbines, saltwater-resistant alloys, kinetic energy storage systems, and behind each patent, a licensing agreement, Global Power Solutions. Atlantic Grid, Pacific Renewables. The dates were current, the royalties were active. My hands started to shake. I was not holding dusty old papers. I was holding the foundational technology for half the green energy grid on the eastern seaboard. The junk schematics my siblings had mocked, the senile scribbles Kyle had wanted to throw away. I looked at the bottom of the stack. A ledger. Annual licensing revenue, $14 million. Total asset valuation, $336 million. I leaned against the drafting table. The breath punched out of me. $336 million. My siblings had walked away with $3 million each, a rounding error. A decoy. Grandma had given them exactly enough money to buy sports cars and destroy themselves, while hiding the real power underground for the only person who knew how to use a key. I picked up my phone. Tyler's car photo was still on the screen. I did not look at it. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Sterling Law, a voice answered. Mr. Sterling, I said. My voice was calm. Lethal. This is Morgan. I am at the lighthouse. I found the almanac. There was a pause on the other end. A pause filled with respect. Very good, Morgan, he said. I will be there in 20 minutes. It is time to initiate the audit. Mr. Sterling arrived 20 minutes later. He did not park his luxury sedan near the lighthouse. He parked it out of sight, behind the dunes. He walked into the basement with the brisk efficiency of a man who specialized in cleaning up difficult messes. He did not say a word as he entered the vault. He simply put on a pair of white cotton gloves and approached the drafting table. He opened the nautical almanac. He verified the patent numbers. He checked the dates on the licensing agreements. He ran the calculations on a small calculator he pulled from his pocket. It is all here, he said, his voice quiet. The entire portfolio. Catherine was thorough. She hid it well, I said. She hid it from those who would not understand its value. He corrected. He looked up at me, his expression grave. But Morgan, there is a problem. The licensing renewal for the Atlantic Grid contract, the $14 million annual revenue stream, requires a physical audit of the prototypes. The turbine models, the alloy samples, the working units. He pointed to a section of the basement that was conspicuously empty. There were marks on the concrete floor where heavy machinery had once stood. According to the inventory in this ledger, the prototypes were stored in the main house library, disguised as art installations. Where are they? I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I remembered the library. I remembered the shredder. But before the shredder, I remembered the truck. 2 days ago. Before the funeral, before the will was read, Tyler called a hauler, I said. He said the library was full of rusty metal garbage that was cluttering up his future office. He did not want to pay for a moving crew, so he found a scrap dealer who would take it away for free, as long as he got to keep the metal. Mr. Sterling stopped moving. He took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. He gave them away? He sold them, I said. For scrap weight. He bragged that he got $500 for the lot. Mr. Sterling put his glasses back on. A cold, predatory smile touched his lips. Morgan, he said, do you realize what they have done? I shook my head. The prototypes were the property of the estate, Sterling said, his voice sharpening into a legal weapon. At the time they sold them, the will had not been read. Probate had not been closed. They had no legal title to those items. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a fresh legal pad. Selling estate assets before probate is theft, he said. But selling proprietary technology protected by federal patents? That is industrial espionage and felony fraud. And because the value of those prototypes exceeds $2 million, we are looking at mandatory prison time. He looked at the empty floor spots. They sold a $2.76 million technological breakthrough to a junk dealer for $500. They didn't know, I said. They thought it was junk. Ignorance is a defense, Sterling admitted. If they could prove that there was no documentation indicating the value of the items, they might plead negligence. He looked at me. Was there any documentation? Any journals? Any inventories that described what those machines were? I thought about the confetti. I thought about the industrial shredder roaring in the library. I thought about Chloe laughing as she fed Grandma's life work into the blades. There were, I said softly. There were 60 years of journals describing every single prototype in detail. And where are those journals now? They shredded them, I said. They broadcast on the internet. Mr. Sterling closed his briefcase with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. Then they did not just sell the assets, he said. They destroyed the only evidence that could have proven their innocence. They burned their own defense. He looked at me. We have the patents. We have the almanac. We have the legal standing. I can draft the lawsuit for damages tonight. $2.76 million. Or we can let the federal authorities handle the theft charges. Draft the lawsuit, I said. I do not want them in prison. I want them to understand the cost of what they threw away. Very good, Sterling said. I will have the papers served in the morning. It took exactly 90 days for the money to run out. It turns out that $3.6 million is a lot of money to a normal person, but it is pocket change to people who think they are billionaires. Tyler leveraged his inheritance into a crypto scheme that collapsed in week 4. Chloe invested in a lifestyle brand launch that ended with a warehouse full of unsold hoodies. Kyle bought a penthouse he couldn't afford the taxes on. They burned through the cash like it was oxygen, terrified that if they stopped spending, the feeling of importance would fade. And then, the lawsuit hit. The estate of Catherine Sterling versus Tyler, Chloe, and Kyle. Damages sought. $2.76 million for the theft and destruction of proprietary prototypes. They did not call a lawyer. They could not afford one anymore. Instead, they drove to the lighthouse. It was raining a freezing, horizontal sleet that came off the Atlantic like buckshot. I was in the lantern room, drinking tea. When I saw their headlights cut through the dark, they parked haphazardly in the mud. I walked down the spiral stairs. I took my time. I checked the thermostat. 72 degrees. Dry. Secure. When I opened the heavy front door, they were shivering on the porch. They looked like wet, angry ghosts. Tyler's designer jacket was soaked through. Chloe's mascara was running down her face in black streaks. "Morgan," Tyler shouted over the wind. "You have to stop this. Sterling is insane. He is suing us for millions. We don't have it." "I know," I said. "I saw the audit." "We are going to go to jail," Chloe sobbed, pushing past Tyler. "Morgan, please. It was just old metal. We didn't know. You can't let them put us in jail over junk." I looked at them, really looked at them. For my entire life, my siblings had seemed like giants. They were the successful ones, the loud ones, the ones who walked into a room and owned it. They had always seemed so powerful. But looking at them now, shivering in the rain, I realized something profound. There is a concept in social psychology about the difference between having and being. My siblings had built their entire identities on what they had. Their confidence, their swagger, their cruelty, it was all a costume rented with grandma's money. It was an external shell. When the money was gone, the shell cracked. And underneath, there was nothing. No resilience, no character, no core. They hadn't built a self. They had just purchased an image. I, on the other hand, had spent years being invisible. I had been forged in the silence. My power didn't come from a bank account. It came from the fact that I could stand in the cold and not break. "You didn't know," I repeated calmly, "because you shredded the instructions." I held up the document I had been reading. It was the licensing agreement renewal for the Atlantic grid. "This is what you threw away," I said. "This is the contract for the junk you sold. It generates $14 million a year in royalties. The total valuation of the patent portfolio you mocked is $336 million. Tyler stopped shivering. He stared at the paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The math was hitting him. The magnitude of their loss was crushing him. "Grandma left you the decoy," I said. "She gave you the cash because she knew you couldn't handle the responsibility of the empire. She left the engine to the only person who knew how to maintain it." "Morgan," Kyle whispered, "we are family." "No," I said. "You were investors, and you sold early." I stepped back. "The lawsuit stands. You stole from the estate. You destroyed the evidence. Now you have to pay the bill." "Morgan, wait!" Chloe screamed, lunging for the door. "Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know," I said. "But you can't stay here." I closed the heavy oak door. I threw the deadbolt. The sound was solid, final, and deeply satisfying. I listened to them pounding on the wood for a minute, then two. Then, the sound faded into the roar of the ocean. I walked back up the stairs, leaving them in the storm they had created. It took a year to fully renovate the lighthouse. I used the first royalty check to restore the lantern room, replacing the clouded glass with crystal-clear panels that caught the morning sun and turned it into fire. I converted the keeper's quarters into a modern archive, climate-controlled and secure, where Grandma's remaining journals, the ones I had saved in the storm cellar, were now preserved under glass. My siblings did not fare as well. The lawsuit settled out of court. They declared bankruptcy. Tyler lost the car, the apartment, and his investor status. He was working at a call center now, living in a studio apartment that smelled of stale pizza. Chloe's influencer career imploded when the details of the shredder incident leaked online. Turns out, the internet doesn't like people who destroy their grandmother's legacy for clout. Kyle moved out of state, ghosting everyone, unable to face the humiliation of being the smart one who lost everything. They were still alive. They were still healthy. But they were hollowed out, shells of the people they used to pretend to be. I did not hate them. Hate takes energy. I just did not think about them. I sat in the lantern room, looking out at the Atlantic. The ocean was calm today, a vast sheet of blue glass. On the desk in front of me lay the Catherine Archive Incorporation papers. We were not just preserving the past. We were funding the future. The foundation gave grants to young inventors. Kids like Grandma had been brilliant and overlooked, working in garages and basements on ideas that could change the world. We gave them resources. We gave them legal protection. We gave them a chance to be seen before the vultures could pick them clean. I picked up the iron key. I had spent hours polishing it. I had used wire brushes, vinegar, and oil. I had scrubbed away decades of corrosion until my fingers were sore. And underneath the rust? It wasn't iron. It was steel. Hardened, tempered, unbreakable steel. It shone in the sunlight, silver and strong. It had not been an insult. It had been a mirror. Grandma knew that rust is just surface damage. It is what happens when strong things are left in the rain. But if you do the work, if you scrub away the neglect and the cruelty, the steel is still there. I walked over to the window. Down below, a group of students were arriving for a tour of the tidal energy facility. They looked up at the lighthouse, shading their eyes, pointing. They did not see a ruin. They saw a beacon. I pressed my hand against the glass. If you are the one holding the rusty key right now, if you are the one they call worthless, the one they ignore, the one they leave behind while they chase the shiny, easy things, listen to me. Do not throw it away. Do not let them convince you it is trash. Rust is just a layer. It protects the metal until it is ready to be revealed. You are not the disappointment. You are the vault. You are the engine. You are the keeper. And one day, when the storm comes and their paper castles dissolve in the rain, you will be the only one left standing. So hold on to your key, polish it in the dark, and wait. Your empire is waiting for you to unlock it.